brings me great joy today to have my friend Dr. Carrie Fullerton on our interview. And so, Dr. Carrie, her background is she's a naturopathic doctor. We've known each other for like way too many years. I can't even count. It also doesn't really matter. We're not going to bring this up right now. Um, Dr. Carrie is a health at every size naturopathic doctor and an intuitive eating consultant and coach. I'm excited to dive into this because I think, and maybe because we're immersed in it so much, we seem to have, or we have this bias maybe that naturopathic doctors have this whole thing about telling you that you can't eat gluten, sugar, dairy, corn, tomatoes, all eggplant, nightshades. I mean, I could go on and on and on and on and on forever. And I know you have a very, very different philosophy and a different approach. So first of all, welcome.
Thank you. I'm very excited to chat with you.
Yeah, I know we're gonna dive into lots of juicy bits. Forget the pun. Forgive the pun. This is, oh boy. Okay, I want to start off with some rapid fire questions with you, Dr. Carey, if that is okay with you.
Absolutely. Hit me.
Okay, when I say the words pure joy, what is the first image or memory that comes to mind?
Oh, my family, my immediate nuclear family, my husband and my son and my dog.
Anything in particular?
We recently did a trip to the Dominican,
Oh.
and the dog was not there. But when you said it's just the like playing catch on the beach with them was like it was just lovely. It just filled me up. Yeah.
Hmm. And was the idea or concept of happiness or joy something that you grew up learning about, talking about at home or at school?
Not that I recall. I mean, I remember hearing lots of, I just want you to be happy, and then a whole bunch of contradictory caveats placed around that. So, um, I don't know. I think my family wanted me to be happy and the best for
Hmm.
me, but maybe they didn't necessarily have the tools or the language, or maybe awareness of
Hmm.
how much that was not actually being promoted in my life.
Hmm. Do you think that is in part related to the work that you currently do?
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. You know, um, I mean, you didn't read my whole history, and people can go on my website to read my whole sordid story. But I have a history of binge eating. Um, and that eating disorder is sadly very misunderstood. Um, and, a big part of that was looking for that comfort and that joy and that sense of connection that maybe I wasn't finding in other areas of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And part of that, I think, I mean, you know me well enough that I can be a bit of a goofball. I like to play and have fun,
Mm-hmm.
but that was very much censored growing up.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, being too loud, being too noisy, being too joyful, being too much, was definitely uh, it was definitely part of that, right? Coming and finding a source of comfort, and food was a reliable source of comfort.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and in the moments, sometimes really felt like joy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for that because we do find a lot of happiness and joy through food. And I think partially it is the food that we actually eat, which is one conversation. Partially it's also the social connection that comes with eating, whether it's with your family, your friends, even coworkers. Like there is something that brings people together when we are all eating and
Yes.
enjoying that meal together. I think this then brings me to sort of talking a little bit more in depth about what you do, which is when you do have a restrictive diet or like a disordered eating pattern, it can really hinder on that sensation of happiness of enjoying food with either yourself or with other people. I know you have lots to say around this, but before I dive in that, can you explain the two concepts that revolve around what you do, which is health at every size and intuitive eating?
Yeah, absolutely. So health at every size is a movement. I don't even know how old it is, honestly. I came to it maybe 10 years ago.
Mm,
And the way that I incorporated it into my practices is very much a weight neutral approach. So my practice is about behavior, not about weight. So
mm,
instead, like, it's not outcome based, just behavior based.
mm,
So we're going to talk about things. My treatment plans are going to be around things that you actually have a modicum of control over.
mm,
And sadly, the truth is we don't have really control over our weight, our body shape, our size, those things.
mhm,
And by focusing on those things, we can really get derailed from actually focusing on our health outcomes.
mhm,
I often say, if it's a lifestyle plan that we're recommending, then why are we concentrating on body changes instead of the lifestyle changes?
mm,
So my practice is based on working towards your health goals, not your
mm,
weight goals.
mm,
Yeah. And intuitive eating, I came to in my own recovery. So it was developed in 1995 by two dietitians who realized that people kept coming in. They'd given them a plan, they'd go, they'd lose weight, and a couple of years later, they'd come back feeling absolutely awful about themselves with at least the weight they lost plus more. And they thought, geez, this isn't working, right?
mm,
Telling people what to eat, how much to eat, when to eat, all that stuff is not actually achieving what we're looking for. So it is a system of 10 principles that concentrates on healing your relationship with your food and your body so that you can adopt an all foods fit philosophy and that
mm,
you can have a good relationship with yourself and with your food, which
mhm,
I mean, I know we're going to dive into all of that, but that's the big thing. It's about not being restrictive. It's really not about dieting at all. It's about learning how to listen to your body and, yeah, and then heed that advice, what your body tells you, with nuance, of course. I mean, there's with eating disorders, neurodivergence, like there's lots of ways that these principles need to be practiced with nuance.
mm.
So I'll just leave that there.
Yeah. What is your response to the whole idea that the one medical community often uses this measurement, and we hear a lot about it in whether it's research or social media or just media in general, this whole concept of BMI, body mass index, and how there's like a healthy range and there's labels around it on either side of this healthy range. What's your response to
Oh, how much time do we have? And am I
that?
allowed to cuss? It's it's super frustrating. It
Mm,
was just historically, it was developed not by a doctor. It was developed to look at population-based trends, not individual measures of health.
mm,
And it was developed with white men
mm,
that are not even they're not North American. Anyways, it's deeply flawed in its roots. And then we medicalized it after I graduated. I graduated in '03, and I'm trying to remember when we actually could put like the two different O words um, as a diagnosis.
I
It
didn't
was the
even
late
know. I
nine.
actually thought it was way older than that. Like, I didn't know it was after
No,
2003.
when I was in school, it wasn't a diagnosis yet. They medicalized BMI in an attempt to make it uh, to decrease weight stigma, I think was their intention, which again did not work in the
No.
slightest because what we did was we pathologized a body size.
Yeah.
And I happen to fall into the obese category of a BMI. And I don't have any ill health measures. Like
Yeah.
there's nothing, and like, so there's that piece that we're pathologizing, and then there's just the weight stigma thing, and that even if fat people are unhealthy, and let me just take 1 second to say when I use the word fat, I use it as a descriptor, like short or tall. Um, so if that's triggering for anyone listening, I apologize. I've just decided to own that word as a descriptive word instead of a moral word, because many people we use fat as a condescending, um, awful word to mean lots of things, and
Mm,
I'm using it as a descriptor. So, yeah, when we use BMI to pathologize bodies, we forget to look at the person that's in front of us. We often don't even ask people about their lifestyle. Um, how much do they move? What do they eat? How do they eat? These are questions that are often not asked.
mm,
It's just immediately into, well, you need to drink less pop, you need to eat less sugar, you need to move your body more, go for a walk. I mean, all these ridiculous suggestions that just, they don't, they're not the person in front of you.
mm,
I don't know. I wrote a blog post once about, it's sort of like if we were to diagnose me with blue eyes and you with brown eyes. And blue eyes
mm,
is associated with uh, quite a few different not so lovely medical conditions. But
mm,
nobody would say, Carrie, look, we got to do something about your blue eyes. Like, this
mm,
is a problem. But we
mm,
do that about someone's body size. And we say, oh, there's associations, therefore we must change this. And the evidence just doesn't support that for a whole host of reasons. First and foremost, being that weight loss is unattainable in any meaningful and sustaining way for the vast majority of people. Like, we're
mm,
talking in the, you know, a high 90s percentile of people. It doesn't work long term. So
mm.
even if it were a solution, which is a whole other conversation,
Yeah.
it's not one that is actually attainable. So to me, it's a ridiculous intervention.
Huh. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of people listening to this kind of eh, the idea that being overweight is associated with a whole slew of health concerns is so ingrained in everything that we talk about and we hold to a, air quote standard in society. And there is so much to dive into this, but one thing that I wanted to ask is for the people who maybe are saying, I do want to lose weight. Are you saying that there's no hope to this? And I'm purposely phrasing it like this because I actually know that you have a lot of patients who have this sentiment. I've worked with a lot of patients with this sentiment. Like how would you address that?
I mean, let me start by saying I completely appreciate why people want to lose weight. I mean, we live in a world where the smaller your body is, the more access you have to social capital, to access, when we were flying to the Dominican, the woman behind me was in a very large body and having to ask for a seatbelt extender, just hoping that no one was going to sit in the seat next to her and her partner, and people hoping as they came in that they didn't have the seat next to her. There's so many things that we get when we have a smaller body, so I completely understand. And that doesn't change that there isn't anything out there that shows that we can take someone from a large body, make them small, and keep them there.
Mm,
And there hasn't been ever.
mhm.
Nothing. Not even weight loss surgery tends to achieve that. So
Yeah.
is it hopeless? If the only focus that you have is weight loss, yeah,
Mm,
it's they're just there. We don't have a way to do that. Now, are there exceptions to that rule? Always.
mhm.
But I mean, you and I have been in business in a long time, right? And we know there's, these people that just magically do these things and make all this money. And they're like this poster child for a
Yeah,
program that
for
no
sure.
one else achieves, right?
Yeah.
It's not that dissimilar in the weight loss world. They hang this one person that has some possibly genetic predisposition to being tiny anyways and go, oh, look what we did for them.
Mm.
But again, research is continuously dismal on weight loss stats. I mean, anyone can lose weight in the short term, Ellen, that part's easy. But keeping it
Right.
off,
Right.
even with medication and surgery, is not attainable for most people.
What about all those things that we see, like, m- e- like transformation? I mean, no, there's one other thing that I can think of that is like always plastering before and after transformation as a way to sell
Yeah,
something. So weight
yeah,
being one of them, and like aesthetics, kind of,
yep.
beauty products being another. So what about that? Like, what's your take on the fact that there's so, quote unquote, so many? Like, I feel like I could probably Google this and come up with tens of thousands,
Yes, you can.
of approaches on how to achieve these massive weight loss um transformations. What's your take on that?
Asked to see their 5-year follow-up numbers.
Mm,
Like I said, anyone can lose weight in the short term. That part's not that hard. At
mhm,
least the first few times. Our bodies are so smart, Ellen. You know this,
mm,
right? So the first time we do this big weight loss attempt, we're going to drop pounds like it's nobody's business. And we're going to
mhm,
be like, hey, check it out. Look at how successful I've been.
mhm,
And then our body goes, oh crap, we're not getting enough food. We're shrinking. This is a problem because we are
mhm,
genetically predetermined to hold weight, not lose weight. We have
mhm,
lots and lots of tripwires to make sure that we hold on to weight.
mhm,
So our body will decrease its metabolism. It will make you tired, so you don't really want to exercise. It will increase your hunger hormones. It will do all these things
mhm,
to make sure that you regain that weight.
mhm,
And, you know, I, how long do we have, Ellen? Um, I attended a workshop, webinar. It wasn't a workshop, it was a webinar about weight loss drugs and weight loss surgeries, directed to dietitians.
mm,
And they presented all of this research. Everything I'm telling you right now, they're like, look, this is what happens. We have set weight, we have all these things. Our
mm,
body's not going to let this happen. And that's why we need to put people on these weight loss drugs so that they can continue to follow
mhm,
a very low caloric diet
mhm,
past the point of the body
mhm,
rejecting.
mhm,
And yet, when they show me the numbers and they show me the very few studies that follow past 2 years, well, at the
mhm,
end of 6 months, it's starting to slow down the weight
mhm,
loss. By the end of a year, it has hit its valley and it's
mhm,
already climbing by the time they
mhm,
end the study.
mhm,
But they'll end the study before people get back up. They're like,
for
oh,
sure.
look, there was sustained weight loss. I'm like,
Yeah.
what? Really? Like,
Yeah.
the trend was up, not down when you
Yeah.
stopped.
Yeah.
And this is, I think, why we have so many short-term studies. Any of the long-term studies, all of them show weight regain.
Right.
All of them.
So for anybody who might be either wrestling with this themselves or know someone they're close to that's wrestling with this, I think there's a lot of, in an attempt to meet what society deems as the ideal, perfect, preferred, whatever word they choose to use to describe
Yep.
it, this body type and shape and weight. I think that can create a very big sense of feeling unhappy with ourselves
Yeah.
and guilt and shame. And so for anybody who might be experiencing this or knows someone who is experiencing this, what pearls of wisdom could you offer for them to reframe um, this train of thought?
My motto is live life, love food, and be free.
Mm,
And part of that, step one is your life is happening. And
mm,
I've said for years, like, this is the body that I woke up in today, and it's the body I'm going to bed in tonight. And there's
mm.
literally nothing I can do today that's going to change. Like, remember a patient years ago came in, she like slumped down in the chair. So how's it going? She's like, I dieted and exercised yesterday, and I'm still fat today. And I laughed
Oh,
because she knew how ridiculous it was, and yet she was so aware that when she
Yeah.
woke up in the morning after being so good the day
Mhm.
before, there was this expectation that something would be different.
Mm.
And so I think it's about, and this is what intuitive eating really is all about, and why I adopted this entire style of
Mhm.
practice is I don't know what size your body is going to decide it's going to be, right? That is entirely outside of my control.
Mm.
But what we can do is concentrate on you taking care of yourself if health is a priority, right?
Mhm.
And broadening that definition of health. Maybe it's your mental health that's the priority right now.
Mhm.
We talk about health as though it is your weight, it is what
Mhm.
you eat and what you exercise.
Mhm.
But health is so much bigger than that. And what we eat and how we move is the tiniest slice of that health pie. Like
Mhm.
it is so small, but it's what we fixated on. But we talk
Mhm.
about financial health, massive, massive impact on health outcomes.
Mhm.
We can talk about mental and emotional health.
Mhm.
We can talk about relationships, right?
Mhm.
These are all bigger pieces of our health pie. And
Mm.
we can really start to create that more balanced wellness wheel that we so often talk
Yeah.
about by shifting some of the focus away from what we're eating and how much we're moving. Now,
Mhm.
before anyone is thinking, oh, great, here's another one of these people saying, screw it all. That's certainly not what I propose.
Mhm.
The whole effort way tends to backfire. So I'm a little bit more structured. I like a little bit of structure in how we discard some of the diet rules, that we use our critical thinking and we start
Mhm.
to really look at what we're doing. Am I doing this blindly, or is there a really good reason for me doing this? I limit my dairy because it's an unpleasant experience when I don't. It's for me and for you. So I just don't do it very often. And when I do, it's in very small amounts. Um, that is different than the days when I just didn't eat dairy because I learned in naturopathic college that dairy's bad.
Mhm.
You know, it's
Mhm.
those are two very different things.
Mhm.
The behavior might look the same, but the intention and the nuance behind it is very
Yeah.
different.
Yeah.
And so its contribution to your life, to your enjoyment, to your happiness, all of that, that's where it makes a difference. It's not so
Mhm.
much in what we see, it's what's happening behind the scenes and what's happening in your
Yeah.
mind around what's happening with your, again, relationship to food, your relationship to movement, to your body, to all of these things.
Yeah. I think that's a really good point because one of the things that I find very frustrating around our profession, being naturopathic medicine, is that I mean, this is a really bold thing to say, but like I feel like we further some of these kind of stigmas around food and what is healthy, etc. Like I think there's some like sort of fundamental ideas around healthy eating. And I mean, you know this way better than I do. And I hope I'm not saying any of this sort of incorrectly or like not whatever. It's just like, I don't even know how to describe it, but it's like we know, okay, so like we know drinking not even water, but like staying hydrated. And I'm even careful if you say drink X amount of water every day, like, but it's actually not true. Like 8 glasses of water a day is a myth. And like
Yep,
just you gotta stay hydrated. Like, cool.
yep,
Probably preferably not all day on caffeine or sugary beverages, and like that's fine, we can have that conversation. I think it's fairly universal no matter what your approach and your idea around health is, that like eating some fruits and vegetables is probably gonna be good for you. Like I feel like those are, but if we actually look at like this like hard and fast rule about what it means to eat healthily, I think, I mean, if we were gonna get really like nerdy and nitty gritty on like the research out there, I think we would end up doing away with a lot of these like ideas around what's healthy
yeah,
and what's not. Like, you know what I
yeah,
mean? And
I
in
do.
in doing that and placing all these rules about you shouldn't eat. I mean, this. I mean, you and I have had multiple conversations. But like, never eat sugar. You can't. like uh, tofu, like uh, corn, like
Yeah.
there's a lot, tomatoes, like there's a lot of these things that, messages out there around this stuff. And like, I always ask, like, I'm always like, are we doing the right thing when we have messages like when we put someone on a very restrictive dietary um plan, are we actually helping them? And I have had people come back to me and be like, well, you shouldn't eat dairy, you shouldn't eat wheat, you shouldn't eat sugar, you shouldn't eat corn, you shouldn't eat soy, you shouldn't eat what, peas, or I don't know. Like, I could keep going on this, but it's like,
Yeah.
okay, so remind me again how I'm supposed to go out and eat dinner with my friends or cook for my family. And then the message I get back, and I know you've heard this before too, is like, maybe you should like surround yourself with people who like eat healthier. And I'm like, so I should get rid of my friends? Like, I don't, like, it's just so,
Alan, I know it breaks my heart. I've actually seen couples divorce
ah,
because one of them adopted a way of eating and a lifestyle that wasn't adopted by the other. And it makes me want to throw up. Like, how is that healthy? How is that healthy? You and I talked about that when we were at that conference, right? Of, excuse me, how could it possibly be healthy to ask someone with a cultural background that includes rice to remove rice, or a cultural background that includes corn to remove corn?
yeah,
That cannot be healthy. A story, we were at the grocery store. I don't know how many years ago this was. Pat was little, and he's 14 now, so it was like that long ago.
yeah,
And we were picking out, it was around a holiday. Maybe it was Thanksgiving, maybe it was, I don't remember, but we were picking out some meat at the butcher counter. And the woman next to us looked and she said, "Oh, look, honey, they eat meat with fat on it." And I
yeah,
looked at her and I was like, "Pardon?" She says, "I don't know what to cook." She was literally bewildered because her daughter had started this new plan and she was trying to cook this traditional meal with all these new rules.
yeah,
And she was just lost.
yeah,
And again, breaking my heart. Now, look, if we're talking about an allergy, like,
sure,
right? Like if we're talking
sure,
about a celiac being
yeah,
exposed to gluten,
yeah,
or someone with an anaphylactic reaction to peanuts, and you're
yeah,
trying to serve them pad thai with peanuts, like,
yeah,
bad idea. That
yeah,
is not what I'm talking about.
yeah, for sure. Yes.
Um, but if we are talking about, again, these blind food rules, these things that, I don't know, this poor mother was just trying to feed her family, and
Mm,
she was so sad.
yeah.
And she was just so sad. And it just, yeah, so I mean, we have marriages breaking up, we have these poor moms not knowing what to feed their families, we have all of this turmoil around
Mm,
food. And, if we circle back to the beginning of our conversation, and when we circle back to, what you and I connect with very often, food. I
mm-hmm.
mean, we sit around the table and we laugh and we get to know each other and we try new things like Korean barbecue and
Yeah.
oysters popping open in the middle of your table. It's very cool. And
Or
all of
fried
these
rice,
really fun
right,
memories.
Dr. Carey?
It-
Fried
I
rice.
thought it was dessert. I
Yeah,
didn't know.
that's fine.
Um, there's so many beautiful things that are being lost to so many.
Yeah,
And in that health sphere of connection,
yeah,
of emotional health, of joy, all of these things, the health and wellness industries and the diet industries are just, they're peeling that away.
yeah.
And if I can circle back to the comment you made about, the research,
Hmm.
I lose many days in PubMed. Um, Many days. All of a sudden,
And
Brendan's
so,
coming home,
just so
Pat's coming off the bus.
PubMed for everybody, anybody listening, is like a database of published research, like umpteen subjects of public of research.
Yeah,
And I mean, don't get me started on PubMed, because even there's like publication bias. So what gets published and accepted into
Absolutely.
research articles usually fits the cultural ideas of certain things. And so, I mean, we could
Yeah.
talk about publication bias a whole
Yeah.
other day. But sorry, I
Yeah.
interrupted. What were you saying about
It's all
PubMed?
good. So, knowing all of what you just said and limitations and what actually we get to read, so many of our colleagues, and I know this from um, someone who taught nutrition at a naturopathic college, don't know if they still do or not, but they appeared to be very evidence-based. And we got all these citations and stuff in our notes, and it was so impressive until I found out that they never actually read the paper, they read the abstract.
Mm,
And the abstract is where all of the bias comes shining through
yeah,
because it is what they present to the world.
yeah.
And when you start to read further in, so like nutritional science is very young. In
Hmm.
the world of research, in the world of medicine, it is very, very young.
Mm,
And it's often done on rodents.
yep.
You are not a mouse. I am not a rat.
Last I
So
checked.
to take, right? I mean, so we do these rat studies that last 8 to 12 weeks,
Hmm.
and we get this information, and we feel that that's enough evidence to change a population's diet.
Hmm.
That's absurd.
Hmm.
It's absurd. Like it
Hmm.
makes no sense,
Hmm.
right? So we're taking these small short-term studies that don't show a causal relationship at all. They show
Hmm.
correlation
On rats.
and on rats, yeah,
Hmm.
not even on humans.
Hmm.
And and then we think that that is enough to bring
Yeah,
to our patients to say, you
yeah,
know what you need to remove from your
yeah,
diet, you know
yeah,
what supplement you need to be taking,
yeah,
you know, and so we cause all this confusion and it's really overwhelming and
yeah,
it's really difficult for people to feel peaceful
mm,
around food. And that's a lot of the work. People
yeah,
come to me saying, I have no idea what to eat.
yeah,
I stand in the
yeah,
kitchen and I have no idea what to
yeah,
eat.
yeah. And
And
I'm really glad.
that's
Sorry.
sad. Sorry. I was
No,
just
no,
going to
no.
express my sadness.
Yeah.
On
um,
your, what is this, a happiness summit?
no, these are really important conversations because I think when we take someone away from foods, it can really deprive them of their feelings of happiness. And I think just there's a lot of nuances in this conversation, and we could be here for a whole day just talking about this. But there's a couple of things you brought up that I think are really important to highlight. One is this whole cultural thing. Like I'm Chinese and we have a cultural way of eating. And I mean, like when I look at that, I'm like, so I guess the quote unquote proper way that sometimes I feel like I've heard a lot in our circles, in whether it's health and wellness, like naturopathic medicine, all that. Like I just feel like so first of all, I would no longer eat cultural foods,
Yep.
which I mean, there's something to be said about that because there's a sense of connection, a sense of identity. And when you remove that, it's hard to wrestle with. That's one.
Mhm.
Secondly, I still think like genetically there's something here because when I tried eating this, like, whole idea about like eating salads and like I grew up in a very traditional household. I didn't eat my first salad until I was like 15. Not eating a cooked vegetable was a very weird concept to me. And I remember when I experimented with this and sort of ate this, like, I don't know, whatever dietary thing I was being
Yep.
put on, but like I started developing really bad stomach aches and like health symptoms. And no, it wasn't because I got food poisoning from eating uncooked vegetables. Like it just didn't agree with my system. I think so. I actually think there's like some genetic component to this as well. I think sort of like bigger picture, and this is like the part of the research that I'm always like, I just first of all, every every a lot of the papers I have read, and I feel like you can definitely speak to this, but like a lot of papers I've read around like eating certain foods, like it increases inflammation. I'm like, and like I like it just
Yep.
everything just was like it increases inflammation as if this is like this worst thing in the and yes, inflammation in our body has health consequences. I just find like it really weird when like you said you're like I measured and the rat ate this thing for like 10 days and its inflammation increased. I'm like, okay.
Yep.
Like it's just I'm like
But
and then
does that mean that if I eat it, I'm going to have increased inflammatory markers? Does it mean that when you eat it, people say to me, well, what are the inflammatory foods? I don't freaking know. And neither do the
Yeah.
scientists, right?
Yeah.
They know, again, we talk about, well, this study showed that like 47% of people that ate the tomato had increased inflammatory markers within blah, 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 blah. Sorry,
Yeah.
not people, rats.
Rats.
And sometimes it's people, but that means that more than half of those people ate a tomato without any change in their
Right.
inflammatory marker.
Right.
So can
And
we remember that?
yes, and I think in a lot of these studies, they eat an insane amount of this one food to test it. Like, let's go down this tomato path. Like, they probably had the rats eat a silly amount of tomato,
Yeah.
where a regular human being will probably eat not that amount of tomato in 10 days to for this study, right? And like the
Yes.
best example of this is like the whole coffee conundrum. And I know you and I are very pro coffee, but like the whole thing where they were like, coffee, it's bad for you. And it's like when you actually look at it, they had, I don't know if it was rats or humans, but it was like a coffee extract. So, first of all, they weren't drinking coffee, they were taking coffee pills. I think it might have been pure caffeine or like some other thing, but like coffee pills at an amount that was just a little bit maybe silly. And like, people, again, the average population doesn't swallow caffeine pills, we drink coffee. And so like the studies that were like coffee is bad, rah rah rah, everybody not drink coffee because it causes inflammation. And then when you take a step back and you like look at cross population studies where people are actually drinking coffee in the amount they usually drink and living the life, and they were just observing them and follow them over time, turns out coffee is really quite good for you. And so it's that
I
whole
was just
thing
going to
where
say,
like, and I'm
last
gonna tell
summer
you
someone
right
called
now, if
me.
somebody takes coffee out of my life, they are decreasing my happiness.
They're
Straight up
fired.
putting on the table right here. And it actually has nothing to do with caffeine. I actually could not have coffee and I would be okay. Like, first of all, there's other ways to get caffeine, so that's one thing. And secondly, like having a warm cup of coffee in the mug that I always drink it in is a sense of comfort. It is a form of routine. It is how I start my day. And like there is something to be said for that. So when we start getting like
Yeah.
super nuanced and like microscopic about this one component in this one food, and we make everything about health and our size and our happiness all related to that one thing, you just lose the bigger picture of living and life, I feel.
Yeah. Yeah. Another one of those silly examples is, with the GI index, right? The
Mm,
glycemic index. So,
mm,
for anyone who's not aware, that's if they measure the spike in blood sugar compared to sugar of various foods.
yeah,
And for decades, people have not been eating carrots, right? So they make a vegetable soup because they're pre-diabetic and they won't put carrots in it. And I'm like, ah, so you would have to eat, I think, I might be exaggerating when I say 2 pounds, but I think it was upwards of a pound of carrots by themselves in one sitting to get that kind of reaction. It was a big amount of carrots. So are carrots a starchy vegetable? No, not unless you're eating them in massive quantities. But man, do they make a good base with your celery and your onions for any soup and stew. They can safely be consumed. And again, glycemic load, although, and this is why we don't like glycemic load, because it requires more thinking. We keep trying to simplify. We
mm,
take these complex, nuanced conversations and
yeah,
try to boil them down, and that sells. I remember being at a conference a couple years ago, and that is what the head person was saying.
mm,
We just need to make it super simple. Like, but that's where blind food rules come in and we lose
yeah,
all this nuance,
yeah, yeah,
You talked about your coffee ritual. Rituals are really important.
mm-hmm,
They're so good for the nervous system,
mm-hmm,
right? To sit and enjoy, a cup of coffee and a couple of cookies or something in the middle of the afternoon
yeah.
because that's when you
Chocolate,
just like,
piece of chocolate,
right?
piece of cake after dinner. Yes.
Like insert all. That is a beautiful experience.
Mm-hmm,
And there have been some interesting studies where they have um, given people foods. that are the same nutritionally, but told the participants that they are not. And the
Mm,
difference in how their body responds to it is remarkable. It's remarkable. So when people think that they're eating something bad, versus there's a milkshake study. It's one of my favorites. And they just changed the label and told some people it was this decadent, creamy, amazing milkshake, and they told the other group that it was this like super balanced, amazing meal replacement. And then they measured their hunger and fullness hormones. I can't remember if they met. I think it was a different study where they measured their like stress response and stuff. But anyway, the point is, when we show up without guilt, when we show up fully engaged and present with our food, our body responds differently. When we show up to culturally appropriate foods, our body absorbs nutrients differently than when we show up to things that are neutrally nutritionally equivalent and yet culturally wrong. Our body doesn't absorb the same way. Our bodies are amazing things, and food is, oh, nourishment is not just about nutrients.
mm,
It's about so much more. So much more. And we haven't even talked about comfort eating and emotional eating, which is
yeah.
like, that's part of eating. It's part of a normal relationship with
Yeah.
food.
Yeah.
We're
Yeah, it is.
supposed to
Yes.
like eating,
Yes.
all those
Yeah.
good pet
I love this. Like
skins.
this is like a really good way for us. And I know like we could really have this conversation for a very long time, and I think it's a
Yep.
good place for us to wrap up on this more positive note, which is that you're supposed to enjoy eating. It is
Yes.
normal to find comfort in food.
Yes.
If you are
Yes.
listening to this or you know someone who is experiencing disordered eating patterns for whatever, like there is the solution to that is not to just go on a diet and cut out food. Like there is a lot of
Yeah.
nuance around what that looks like. I think
Yeah.
we have a lot to examine around our understanding of what healthy food is. And I think this is one of your biggest messages, Dr. Carey, too. It's like when you see the messages of this is the absolute healthiest way to eat and this is the thing you're supposed to do, just to take a step back and just be mindful of a lot of the things that we've covered in this interview and conversation today about quote unquote research and just, culturally and our mindset around food. Like when we feel good about eating something, we actually absorb it differently. When we don't feel good and there's guilt and shame and anger and resentment around the thing we're putting in our mouth, that does something different to our physical body, but obviously also our mental health. And so this has been a really good conversation. If this strikes your interest, I highly recommend that you connect with Dr. Carey and her work around this and in this area. I think you'll find it refreshing and more wholesome and holistic when it comes to discussing what truly is a healthy way of eating. I want to wrap up today with a couple rapid fire questions for you, if that is okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go.
Okay. So, what is a color you associate with happiness?
Blue.
Love it. It's so we. I've actually had a couple people say this, and I think it's interesting because we like when you say you feel blue, it usually means you feel upset or down, right?
I know, blue skies.
Yeah, no, that's
They
true.
they
That's
make
true.
me smile
Yeah,
every time.
that's true. I actually associate blue with happiness too, but I think it's just interesting the way we
It
talk about
is.
it.
Yep.
Okay, this is a rapid fire question that seems very on point today, but what is a food or beverage you associate with happiness?
Oh, there's too many to name. Um, hmm. uh, I will fall back to some sort of baking because I used to connect with my grandmother through the kitchen, my mother and one of my grandfathers. So I would say on a savory side, it would be tea biscuits, and on a sweet side, it would be a toss up between butter tarts and cookies.
I love that you, of course, are the person that gives me the differentiation and be like, well, there's so many, so I'm going to give you the savory and the sweet. And that's awesome. Okay, last question to wrap up today. If you were to imagine a being any form, any shape, being plopped down on the earth for the very first time. Okay, completely blank slate, no preconceptions, beliefs, memories, completely new and fresh. What is the one thing you would want to teach them or share with them about happiness?
Mm. They are whole and complete as they are.
Mm,
So absorb the beautiful experiences that is our planet, knowing that you don't need anything to be better than where you are right
that is a very sweet and peaceful and compassionate and kind way to wrap up our conversation today. Dr. Carrie Fullerton, my dear friend and respected colleague, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to share in this conversation.
now. Oh, thank you so much for helping me have these conversations with more people. I love it.
Okay, for everybody who wants to get in touch with Dr. Carrie, she has a free resource. I think it's going to be close to this interview somewhere on the page you are viewing this. She has a free resource to share with you. You can connect with her on social media. We'll have all of her links available for you. Thank you once again.